Over the past few years, Thai horror films have taken the world by storm, enthralling audiences with a unique mix of ancient folklore and contemporary fears. These movies tap into Thailand's rich cultural tapestry, where supernatural beliefs and ghost stories are an integral part of daily life. Many of these Thai horror films tell chilling tales of restless souls and haunted places, and they all intrigue and terrify viewers alike with their eerie atmospheres and spine-tingling narratives. But in the year 2019, a horror story far more terrifying than anything on the silver screen became a reality. In the quiet suburban district of Bang Khai in Bangkok stood a large mansion. By day, it was a symbol of luxury and elegance. But as night fell, there seemed to be an unsettling silence that enveloped the property. One fateful day in 2019, authorities were summoned to the mansion and discovered a scene of unimaginable horror. In the murky, algae-covered pond beside the house, they found several metal caskets containing the skeletal remains of women, some of which were those of young teenage girls. As the investigation progressed, the full extent of the terror emerged. Hidden beneath the flower beds and statues that had been scattered around the property were dozens of bone fragments, all belonging to women whose lives had been tragically cut short. But this was only the beginning. The way these women met their end was more grotesque and sinister than anyone could have ever imagined. And the killer was not just any ordinary person, but the heir of a prominent family in Thailand. His name was Apichai Ongwisit, and his twisted actions turned the Bang Khai district into a real-life horror story, instilling a sense of fear and terror that is far worse than those found in local horror films. In the wake of his crimes, the mere mention of his name sent chills down the spines of locals. Children were not allowed to venture near the mansion. Some even called it the House of Horrors, and rightfully so. This mansion was the scene for one of Thailand's most heinous crimes, and it all began with a metal coffin. You're listening to Heinous, an Asian true crime podcast produced by One Up Media. This episode may contain sensitive details and graphic imagery. Listener discretion is advised. The nickname Ice Metal Casket is loosely translated from the Thai term Ice Heap Lek. This was a name that was given to Apichai Ongwisit by the public. In the Thai language, the name implies a coldness or a chilling effect. Heap Lek translates directly to metal casket or iron chest, which conveys a sense of something being securely locked away or preserved in a sinister manner. Together, Ice Heap Lek evokes an image of something cold, concealed, and grim, which certainly fits the horrifying nature of Apichai's crimes and the public perception of him. The Ongwisit family is well known throughout Thailand, largely due to their various business enterprises. Despite their wealth and privileges, Apichai grew up in the shadow of a family that had already been marred by violence and crime. Apichai was born in 1980 in Bang Khai, a district in Bangkok located on the outskirts of the city. While it is still part of the capital, the district has a more laid-back atmosphere, in stark contrast to the bustling energy of central Bangkok, known for its crowded streets, vibrant nightlife, and constant activity. Because land was more available here, locals could buy large properties that could fit a mansion and even a pond. And this is exactly what the Ongwisit family did. Apichai's father was named Chalamchai Ongwisit, and he was a prominent figure in the local business community. He owned the now-defunct Ongwisit Market, which was once a prosperous and bustling market in Bang Khai that teemed with vendors and shoppers. Besides his business ventures, not much is known about his father's personal life. Well, at least nothing good. Because while the Ongwisit family was well respected in the business community, an event in 1983 had permanently tarnished their name. In 1983, a 15-year-old girl was reported missing, and within days of the investigation, Chalamchai Ongwisit was arrested and named the primary suspect in her disappearance. Police found the girl's body in pieces, scattered like trash. This was a discovery that sent shockwaves through the community. At the time, several reports indicated that Apichai's father, Chalamchai Ongwisit, became furious and violent after learning that the girl had broken one of his prized possessions, a custom-built fish tank. Though many details of the case remain unclear, it is known that Ongwisit became so furious that he killed the girl. To cover up the crime, he dismembered her body and scattered the parts around Bangkai. As a result, Ongwisit was arrested and charged with the murder of the 15-year-old girl. However, before the investigation could conclude, Chalamchai was shot dead in what many believe to be a shoot-to-kill order. Rumors also started to circulate that Apichai's mother could have been involved in the crime and even helped in the cover-up. However, when authorities sought to investigate further, she vanished. After learning about her husband's death, she left the country with her daughter, leaving Apichai under the care of a distant relative, who by all records seemed to not show any affection or care for him. From an early age, Apichai was surrounded by violence and crime. As a child, he often roamed the streets, where he witnessed many illegal activities and transactions. Many believed that this exposure only deepened the darkness within him, shaping his personality and future actions. When he became an adult, Apichai inherited the property that his late father had purchased in Bangkai. At this point, he had already been abusing drugs, and to make it worse, his livelihood depended on it. Records indicate that Apichai began selling drugs on the streets, which he saw as the perfect job. Not only could he make quick money, but he also indulged in his own supply. But you see, it wasn't just the mansion and the land that Apichai received from his late father. He had also inherited his entrepreneurial skills, which helped him evolve from a small local drug dealer to the mastermind of his own illegal drug empire. Soon, the property he owned in Bangkai served as a haven for all illicit activities. The high walls surrounding the property provided him cover from the prying eyes of his neighbors, while the mansion's size served as both a makeshift warehouse for storing his supplies and living quarters for his underlings. However, it was not always smooth sailing for Apichai, as he did have several run-ins with the law throughout his time selling drugs. One day, police raided the mansion and discovered over 1,000 yaba pills, a widely abused substance in Southeast Asia. The word yaba means crazy medicine in Thai, owing to its two key ingredients, caffeine and methamphetamine. These pills are extremely popular in certain parts of Thailand, and they are often taken before going to nightclubs or music festivals due to the immediate high they provide and their highly addictive nature. The large volume of pills found on Apichai's property led authorities to suspect that he was more than just a middleman. He might have been manufacturing them within his mansion. It became evident that Apichai had become a significant figure in Thailand's illegal drug trade, far beyond personal use or small-scale distribution. He had established a vast network of drug dealers and suppliers, selling various types of contraband. This discovery highlighted his extensive operations and his ability to maintain a thriving drug empire, which also points to his deep involvement and high level of influence within the illegal drug industry. But his reputation as a drug lord was just the tip of the iceberg of everything wrong and dark about Apichai. In addition to its glamorous malls and street food stalls, Thailand is also known for another aspect, its infamous sex tourism industry. Apichai was a regular in the red light districts, where in these seedy alleys and dimly lit clubs, he was known as a VIP, or big spender, thanks to the profits from his illegal drug trade. But his visits were never just about indulging in physical pleasures at brothels and spas. He was feeding a growing appetite for power and control. Records state that his encounters were numerous, with each woman representing a fleeting romance or a night of passion. Yet, beneath the surface, there was always something darker. His interactions were never merely about sexual gratification. They were expressions of dominance and a means to assert his influence. You see, Apichai was a violent person, and although he's had many girlfriends, his aggression and violence only worsened, driving away any woman who tried to stay loyal. His temper was volatile, and his jealousy was incredibly suffocating. In 2018, on a humid Bangkok night, Apichai was interested in a young masseuse who caught his eye. However, she resisted his advances. In response, he stood by the door outside the spa where the woman worked and waited for her to leave. As soon as she did, he grabbed her forcefully by the arm and placed a gun against her back. Clenching her arm tightly, he demanded she follow him to his home in Bangkai, threatening to pull the trigger if she refused. Details after this incident are scarce, but it is known that the woman filed a police report. However, through an out-of-court settlement, the charges were eventually dropped. This close brush with justice should have served as a lesson for Apichai, but instead, it only emboldened him, making him even more possessive towards the women and young girls he met. One of which was 22-year-old Warrenthorne Chayachet. Like many big cities around the world, Bangkok attracts millions of locals who travel long distances from the countryside to come to the capital to find work. Among them was Miss Chayachet, affectionately known as Cook Kik by her friends and family. In 2019, she left her hometown in rural Thailand to work in the capital city. Records state that she cherished her simple and charming life in the countryside. However, her world came crumbling down when her husband left her and their young infant daughter. With no one to support her, she decided to seek better employment opportunities in Bangkok. Eventually, she found work as a hostess in a spa, but fate had led her to meet Apichai Ongwisit. It was in July 2019 when Apichai first met Chayachet, and the sight of her instantly caught the 40-year-old's attention. She was young, vibrant, and full of life, and he wanted her. One day, he invited her out for drinks at a bar, and she gladly accepted. Initially, their dates were purely casual, but Apichai soon found himself wanting to spend more time with her. Before long, they began seeing each other more frequently to get to know one another better. He must have really liked her because he even took her back to his home in Bangkai. At first, their encounters were full of promise and excitement. However, as their relationship deepened, so did Apichai's possessiveness. Chayachet quickly found herself trapped in a web of control and fear. Apichai's jealousy was all-consuming and often escalated into physical fights. Whenever the couple tried to reconcile, the situation would only deteriorate further. Eventually, she had no choice but to end their relationship. However, she would never have known that ending their relationship would cost her her life. It was a hot day in August when Chayachet summoned all her strength and courage to visit Apichai's home in Bangkai. She let herself in through the gates, greeted some of his workers, and entered the mansion. Her footsteps echoed through the hallway, where his employees were busy packing the supplies on the tables. She called out Apichai's name, and a moment later, he emerged from the upper floor, his eyes narrowing as he tried to read her expression. As he descended the stairs, his gaze remained fixed on her, trying to gauge her intentions. Once he reached the ground floor, she told him that they needed to talk privately, so he led her outside to the garden. When they arrived, Chayachet looked him in the eye and told him that their relationship was over. She explained that their fights had become unbearable and their relationship had turned toxic. His possessiveness and jealousy had suffocated her to the point where she dreaded seeing him. With her heart pounding, she exhaled deeply, bracing for another violent outburst from Apichai. But this time, it wasn't what she expected. Apichai stared at her for several seconds and then walked away. She watched as he walked towards the tool shed by the pond. Then, he calmly grabbed a metal rod in his hand and turned around. Immediately, Chayachet knew what was about to happen, but it was too late. Turning around, she ran as fast as she could, but Apichai caught up with her, grabbing her by the hair. For the next few seconds, he beat her mercilessly on her legs, chest, and head. The assault was brutal and vicious. Eventually, she collapsed to the ground with blood pouring out from her head. She tried to desperately crawl away, using every last bit of strength to save her own life. But from the back, Apichai grabbed her by her hands and dragged her to a metal casket that was lying open nearby. He pushed her inside and locked it shut. This would be the last time that Chayachet was seen alive or heard from by her family and friends. The next day, when Apichai opened the casket, Chayachet was dead. Her lifeless body slumped to the ground. In a panic, he grabbed a plastic sheet, wrapped her corpse, and dug a small hole near the garden to bury her, thinking she would never be found. However, several months later, the police came knocking on his door. This time, it wasn't for drugs, but for murder. It was December 2019, and at a police station in Bangkok, the phone rang with an anonymous tip. The voice on the other end was urgent, warning authorities about a major drug deal involving a significant player in the industry. Alarmed and curious, the investigators sprang into action. An officer, gripping the phone with one hand, scribbled down the details furiously with the other. The caller provided the location of the deal and even handed over the name of the peddler, Chalamchon, before abruptly ending the call. With this information in hand, the police knew they had to move quickly. In response, they organized a team and began planning the operation to intercept the deal, hoping to catch the man named Chalamchon in the act. This was supposed to be a routine drug bust for the officers, but perhaps none of them had any idea who they were about to face. By the afternoon, the police had devised their strategy. Undercover officers, dressed in plain clothes, were dispatched to survey the designated location, a rundown apartment in a less glamorous part of Bangkok. The scene buzzed with a quiet tension as the officers discreetly surrounded the building. Meanwhile, uniformed officers moved silently through the crowded alleyways. Their target was a man named Chalamchon, and he was known to frequent this apartment. With a swift, coordinated move, one of the officers kicked open the door. There he was, caught off guard and panic flashing across his face as he attempted to escape. Within seconds, he was subdued and handcuffed. His arrest marked a small victory in the ongoing battle against the drug trade that had plagued Thailand for years. However, the officers sensed that this arrest was only the beginning. In the dimly lit confines of the interrogation room, Chalamchon sat shackled to the chair. Across him, the lead detective leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "So, Chalamchon," the detective began, "you've been arrested for possession and distribution of illegal narcotics. We already know that you're part of a larger network. Tell us their names. Help us, and it might help you." At first, Chalamchon responded only with silence, but the detective continued, even laying out the evidence they had against him. Piece by piece, photographs, witness statements, and surveillance footage were put on the table. As the minutes ticked by, Chalamchon's defiant silence started to waver, his eyes flickering over the papers laid out before him. The detective leaned in closer, sensing the shift, and pressed on. His questions were relentless, probing about his connections, his suppliers, and the locations of his drug stashes. It took a few hours, but finally, the young man's resistance began to crumble. With a heavy sigh, Chalamchon began to speak. Chalamchon revealed that Apichai was his employer. He hinted at his dark secrets, violent rumors, and horrifying stories linked to the mansion in Bangkai. The information was vague but tantalizing, and to the investigators, it suggested a deeper, more sinister story. Then Chalamchon dropped another bombshell, the name Warinthorn Chayachet. He claimed that she was his boss's girlfriend and revealed that she was dead, allegedly killed by Apichai himself. Interestingly, he also hinted to the police to dig up the grounds of Apichai's mansion, suggesting that they would find what they were looking for. Days after the interview, the police confirmed Chalamchon's chilling statements. The woman he mentioned, Warinthorn Chayachet, had indeed been reported missing since August of 2019. They learned that she was working as a hostess in one of the spas located in downtown Bangkok, but her employers and family had reported her missing for the past few weeks. This information was enough to prompt a team of officers to plan a visit to the mansion in Bangkai. For the police, the operation needed to be flawless. Any mistake could lead to the escape of a dangerous criminal, or worse, more lives being lost. Teams from various units were assembled: narcotics, homicide, and special operations, and each officer received a detailed briefing on their role. Police also knew that the mansion was not only heavily guarded, but rumored to be filled with traps and surveillance. As a result, detailed maps of the property's layout were spread across tables, and every entry and exit point was scrutinized. With a final nod, the officers donned their gear and moved out. As dusk fell, the task force had skillfully moved into position outside the walls of the mansion. Minutes later, a signal was given, and the raid commenced. They moved swiftly, breaching the gates with a thunderous crash. Officers poured into the mansion, weapons drawn, and shouting for the people inside to surrender. The initial wave of shock from the raid quickly gave way to chaos as guards attempted to retaliate, but they were swiftly overpowered. Inside, the officers split up and swept through the rooms, and what they found was enough to ensure that Apichai would be jailed for a very long time. In a hidden basement, officers discovered an outrageous amount of drugs. Bags of yaba pills were stacked, with some even reaching the ceiling. But the true horror lay beyond the drugs. In a dimly lit room, they discovered what appeared to be instruments of torture, blood-stained tools, restraints, and evidence of unspeakable acts of violence. Meanwhile, the officers stationed outside had noticed a freshly excavated section of the ground. Without hesitation, they began to dig. After several tense minutes, they discovered the decaying body of a woman. Looking at the remains of the victim's torso, police could discern that she had a large tattoo on her back. Comparing this with the images of Chayachet, they confirmed she had a distinctive dragon tattoo spanning her back. This discovery had only validated their worst fears. Crime scene investigators carefully retrieved the body, noting that it was wrapped in plastic and covered in multiple bruises. Meanwhile, the rest of the officers fanned out across the property, determined to locate Apichai. After several minutes, an officer emerged, escorting a man down from the upper floors of the mansion. His hands were cuffed, and his expression was one of resigned calm. This was Apichai Ongvisit. He had been found in his bedroom, naked and likely under the influence of drugs. He offered no resistance, and his demeanor was surprisingly calm as he was led down the staircase. Outside, the atmosphere was charged with a mix of relief and tension. News of the arrest spread quickly among the officers, each one aware that this was a significant victory. However, to many of them, it was only a step in the larger battle against the criminal empire that Apichai had built. Shortly after his arrest, the police began interrogations. To their surprise, Apichai was calm and cooperative, even confessing to his crimes. They discovered that Apichai had not only killed Chayachet, but possibly other women as well. This was a shocking revelation, but the question is, where were the remains of the others? Several weeks later, in January of 2020, investigators returned to Apichai's residence in Bangkai. After hours of searching, they found no evidence suggesting that he had killed another victim. But just as hope began to wane, they received an anonymous tip directing them to search the pond on the property. Acting on this new lead, the officers brought in specialized equipment and began to dredge the murky waters. What they found was beyond their worst nightmares. Submerged and concealed in the depths of the pond were human remains. The first piece was brought up by one of the divers, and a quick examination by a pathologist confirmed that it was a bone fragment. Minutes felt like hours as the divers combed through the thick silt at the bottom of the pond. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sounds of their breathing apparatus. Then, a muffled shout echoed through the radio. A casket had been found. With its surface covered in thick layers of algae and mud, divers pulled the metal box onto the shore. Then it was pried open, and inside lay the skeletal remains of a young woman. What was particularly concerning about this find was the traces of thick rope around her bones, likely indicating she had been tied up before she drowned. Meanwhile, more metal caskets were brought to the surface, and the scope of Apichai's crimes became painfully clear. Each box contained the remains of another victim, and each one bore the marks of unimaginable suffering. Some caskets held personal items like bracelets, rings, and locks of hair, while others contained only human bones. One particularly large, rust-covered casket contained a collection of bone fragments that were meticulously arranged and catalogued. These remains appeared to belong to multiple individuals, indicating that Apichai had not only killed but also dismembered his victims. A total of 298 bone fragments were found at the end of the search. And now, Apichai had some explaining to do. As news of the investigation broke, Thailand's media went into overdrive. The city buzzed with the shocking story of the man named Apichai Ongwisit and the ice metal casket. Headlines screamed about the horrors discovered at his mansion, bodies hidden in the pond, and drugs fueling his empire. Public shock and outrage were immediate. These revelations had shattered any lingering sense of safety in the Bangkai district. Families of the missing watched in anguish, fearing their loved ones might be among the victims, while social media exploded with speculation and condemnation as people struggled to understand how someone could commit such a heinous crime. As the investigation progressed, Apichai Ongwisit was charged with multiple counts of murder, drug trafficking, and other crimes. Fortunately, the legal proceedings were swift and meticulous, with the courts eager to bring justice to the victims and their families. His defense team did try to make several attempts to portray him as a man that was driven by mental illness. However, the sheer brutality and premeditation of his crimes left little room for any sympathy. Official records list only 2 female victims killed by Apichai, but many believe there were likely many more unaccounted for. For now, the true number of his victims remain unknown, but despite this uncertainty, Apichai Ongwisit was sentenced to life in prison. Unfortunately, the incomplete count of his victims only added to the horror of his crimes, leaving many families and investigators haunted by unanswered questions. However, perhaps the people of Thailand can take solace. in knowing that one of the country's most notorious killers is locked away for good. Heinous, an Asian true crime podcast, is brought to you by OneUp Media. This episode was produced and written by Guangjin, edited by Alex, narrated by Jason, audio experience by Ethan Sam, additional engineering by Ashley from OneUp Media. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next one.